We are rolling here at UCLA on 2/5/15, considering the question of incarceration in the United States. And we're about to hear from the position that we should lock up more people, not fewer people. So we'll hear from Shireen.
Yes. Okay. Hi, I'm Shireen.
Hi, Shireen.
Because the rate of crime is too high, I stand in negation of the resolution resolved that the United States should not incarcerate so many people. But let's look at a definition. The phrase "so many people" is central to the resolution. The term "so many people" indicates that the United States is already imprisoning too many individuals. Therefore, as the negative, if I prove that the United States is not incarcerating too many people, I win the debate. But what is the problem? Many argue that the incarceration rate in the United States is too high. In fact, Professor of Sociology Nadimi writes in 2012 that the United States has the highest incarceration rate in the world. 743 per every 100,000 adults are imprisoned. While these numbers may seem alarming, as we later will discuss, the reasons for imprisonment are valid and do in fact decrease crime overall. But the real problem is the increasing amount of crime occurring in the United States. Skinner, writing for Reuters, writes on October 31st, 2014, that while the crime rate continues to rise, less people believe that this phenomenon is occurring. Only 64% of Americans believe that crime is increasing. And at a time when crime is increasing, without status quo prison policies, the amount of crime would multiply. Levitt, a sociology professor at the University of Chicago, writes in 2004 that by locking offenders up, we remove them from the street, thus preventing them from committing even more crime. This is called the incapacitation effect. And prison serves as a deterrent effect to would-be offenders, thereby diminishing the amount of possible crime. Fortunately, McKenzie, PhD, no date on this article, finds through empirics that correctional facilities are beneficial in 6 ways: deterrence, rehabilitation, community restraint, structure, discipline, and challenge, and combining rehabilitation with restraint. Further, those who commit crimes such as brutal rape, murder, child molestation, robbery, and drug proliferation deserve their place behind bar. Therefore, given the increased crime rate, the immense need for prison, and the benefit of the prison system, the fact of the matter is that we should be locking up the amount of people we are locking up in the status quo, and we do not incarcerate too many people. But how big is the problem? Some believe there's a problem in the amount of people the U.S. incarcerates, but rates of imprisonment are actually drastically decreasing. The Atlantic writes on October 29, 2014, that the U.S. prison population has declined every year since 2008. For example, Oklahoma decreased its prisoner count by 1,800 prisoners in 1 year alone. Georgia diverts drug offenses to alternatives other than prisons. Unfortunately, at a time when crime rates are increasing, we continue to decrease prison sentences, thereby increasing crime. And the incarceration rates will continue to decrease. The Washington Post writes on September 16, 2014, that numerous states have not only elected officials that are decreasing imprisonment rates, but have also changed laws that result in less imprisonment. Therefore, because of this decrease, we can conclude that the U.S. is not imprisoning too many people because incarceration rates are clearly decreasing. But why do we have this problem? The increasing crime rate in the United States is a byproduct of ineffective economic and social welfare programs, making a life of crime the only possible solution for offenders. In fact, in a study done by the Roper Center at the University of Connecticut, the crime rate is caused 20% by a failure of the criminal justice system, i.e., the courts are too lenient. When 20% of crime committed is caused by problems such as leniency of courts, we can see that we are not imprisoning the amount of people we need to be to ensure that crime does not continue. Torrey writes in the Sage Journal in 1999 that the problem of crime rates arises partly from American moralism and partly from the structural characteristics of American government that provide little insulation from emotions generated by moral panics. Clearly, the problem is not that too many people are in prison, but too many people are committing crime. This problem is a result of the flawed structural characteristics of the United States. Therefore, to solve the problem, we have to address these characteristics. But let's look at the solution. The solution is threefold. We first must continue our rates of imprisonment. This ensures that future preventable crimes do not occur. Second, we need to create more in-prison programs that ensure that prisoners, when released from prison, do not end up committing crimes. Caruthers, JD, and a head of criminal justice unit, writes, unfortunately, in regards to repeat offenses, 5% of offenders are responsible for 19% of the criminal convictions and 37% of felony convictions. Therefore, when addressing a solution to the problem, we need to find ways to reduce repeat offenses. Programs such as the Prison Industry Enhancement Certification Program, PIECP, should be installed in order for prisoners to have prospects rather than returning to crime when released from prison. Increased educational and vocational training within prisons also ensure that convicts have proper training so when they're released from prison, they don't revert back to a life of crime. The last solution is that we need to change structural barriers that cause individuals to turn to a life of crime. Public Perspective writes in 2012 that 38% of crime is a result of an individual's personal life and circumstances, because the structure is flawed against many individuals. Therefore, a solution has to affect the structural violence problems that entrap people in a life of crime. Therefore, the solution is to provide more funding to educational services to at-risk neighborhoods. If we can provide resources for those people that thought they had no resources, particularly to those who are impressionable due to their young age, then we can ensure that juveniles have other options rather than resorting to a life of crime. But will the solution work? Continuing and even increasing our rate of imprisonment is a proper solution because locking people up is good punishment for people's crimes. Mackenzie, previously cited, states that for as long as offenders are incapacitated, they cannot commit crimes outside of the prison. Therefore, crime is reduced because the incarcerated offenders are prevented from committing crimes in the community. Further, in-prison programs are incredibly effective when they're funded. Marilyn Moses and Cindy Smith's PhD conducted a 20-year evaluation of PIECP, the program I recommended. Post-prison, 49% of PIECP participants were employed continuously for more than a year. Further, 82% of participants went arrest-free for their first 3 years after release. But what are the advantages to our proposal? The first and most significant advantage is that we prevent crime. When we do lock up criminals, the rate of crime decreases. Further, the prisoners are released if programs such as PIECP are instead are put into place. The second advantage is that we ensure people get punished for their crimes. What would America be if we did not punish people for committing heinous crimes? Therefore, locking up people increases justice in the United States. Our third advantage is that we deter future crimes. Remember that if we imprison people, they will not be committing crimes that they would have. But what are the disadvantages? They're not many. The most significant disadvantages is that the economic price of increasing imprisonment. However, because we ensure repeat offenders do not go to prison, we ultimately decrease overall costs in the long run. But on balance, what outweighs? Without a doubt, the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages. Ensuring justice is served, rates of crimes decrease, and repeat offenders are gotten rid of is a moral imperative. This outweighs the cost that the United States may pay. Therefore, I think that you should vote negative, and I'm open for cross-examination.
Thank you. Let's start here. What'd you like?
Hi, I'm Hazy.
Hi, Hazy.
We had a really good delivery.
Good delivery.
Yeah,
Very story-like.
Yeah.
Narrative was easy to follow.
Yeah, and you emphasize the words that you really wanted to say, so it's easy to understand your point.
How could she improve?
Oh. I think her presentation was impeccable. In terms of improvement, I don't know, just I think you can elaborate on your evidence a little more.
Yeah. Okay, this was a model negative brief, Shireen, and well presented. It was really well done, really well done. Glad you skipped the definitions, although you had them there. They weren't necessary. You tackled the problem very clearly with what is the problem, and you had a good twist on it. And you presented the evidence that, you know, from Reuters, etc., crime is increasing, and it's going up now. And it's, by the way, it's going up in California now that we're, you know, Jerry Brown is sending all the criminals out on the street and so forth because of the federal order to, you know, empty the prisons. So, you know, and people are going to start putting two and two together shortly and going to be going back for more punitive prison policies. I liked your, you found the hardcore evidence for the theorists that talk about, you know, really using punishment to suit the crime and that sort of thing. The McKinsey stuff was excellent. Yeah, it was really good. I liked the way you turned the evidence about Alaska and Hawaii and Oklahoma. I thought that was really excellent. Incarceration rates decreasing, yeah, that was good. Why do we have the problem? This was interesting. You talked about social welfare programs making a life of crime the only possible solution for offenders. I think this could have been elaborated on more. It's a very touchy subject. This dependency culture we're promoting, but it's clearly a part of the problem, and you know, and the federal government is part and parcel to that in some people's opinions. Yeah, 38% was caused by a failure of the criminal justice system. That was good. Your solution was continue to imprison people, and yet you still weren't a completely hard-hearted woman. You said we can have some rehabilitation that will work. And that was good. And you gave an example of the Texas case that was good. Yeah, that worked well. I noticed you decided not to include the McKinsey stuff, but that was okay. And your advantages were good. You keep criminals out of the society where they're going to commit more crime. So you did a super job on this. And your research was very thorough and very recent. So you did a nice job. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have time for one more and still explain the test. Yeah, one more. Okay.
Can it be a negative?
Can it be a negative? Oh, you want to follow that with another negative? Sure. She came dressed for class. Okay. Before you... I have an unrelated question to when you there were two people that I'm not Point Loma now. There were two people that I referred to you for rides, right?
Oh yes.
Did they both talk to you, or?
Well, I just in class just a little bit, yeah, and I'm down. I have like some sections tomorrow. I don't know. Yeah, I mean I can't leave until like afternoon, but. Yeah, right on.
So you're going to ride with her? Okay, okay. So I wanted to get that clear because there's no reason to take two cars, right? Yeah. So and then that other girl, maybe, huh?
Possibly. I was maybe going to stay down there.
Oh, okay.
That night,
we have some other options. We have some other options to bring her home.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. So that was the third girl was just the come back from San Diego.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, sorry for the digression. Okay, you're step back a step. Okay, rock and roll.
Hi, my name is Celestine.
Hi, Celestine.
Today the topic is the United States should not incarcerate so many people, and this proposition is to be presented as a policy case in the negative. And first, I do want to define some of the words in here because I want to differentiate between incarcerate and keep incarcerated. The previous refers to the arrest and imprisonment, and the latter refers to the United States keeping people in prison by ways of limiting people's releases, extending sentences, and other means of solving the problem at hand discussed later in this brief. And so many, being the crux of the issue, so many suggest that the affirmative will support that there is an excess of people incarcerated, and the United States should incarcerate fewer people, put fewer people in prison. And I will argue that the United States should maintain its current incarceration rate. So what's the problem? Over the past 3 decades, the prison population has continued to increase. The average incarceration sentence length for all offenders is 54.9 months, which is approximately 4.5 years that each offender will be in prison. The increase of population of incarcerated criminals has continually increased without a correlating decrease of crime rates, and many people inaccurately attribute the rising prison population to more people being sentenced to prison. But according to the Washington Post and Maurer and Coyle in 2011, June 17th, that is a myth because longer prison terms, more than new prison sentences, have fueled the prison population expansion. So how big is the problem? Federal prisons house 60% more inmates than they're designed for, and state prisons are only slightly less over capacity. This was reported by The Economist in 2010 on July 24th. In 17 states, the prison population is now higher than the capacity of the facilities designed to hold them. And with growing budget deficits, the state governments are overwhelmed by the burden of trying to fund a rapidly expanding penal system. Federal, state, and local spending on correction costs taxpayers close to $75 billion. This was reported by the Washington, D.C. Center for Economic and Policy Research in 2010 by Schmidt, Warner, and Gupta. The total cost for incarceration alone is $68 billion. Federal prison costs are expected to rise to 30% of the Department of Justice's budget by 2020, reported by Klein and Soltis in the Washington Post in 2013 on August 13th. And another indication of how big this problem is that an examination of state budgets has revealed that most states, despite spending more money overall on education, are still spending 3 to 4 times more capita on incarcerating prisoners than they are educating students. So why do we have this problem? Now, increased media coverage incited public fear of the surge in crime. So despite a 33% decline in homicides from 1990 to 1998, coverage of homicides on the big channels like ABC, NBC, and CBS Evening News increased by 473%. This was the statistic found by the Justice Policy Institute by Schiraldi, Colburn, and Lochte in 2004. Ordinary citizens base their opinions of what they know about crime from the mass media. Consequently, they believe that sentences are much softer than they are, yet when they're asked to propose sentences for each individual case, they generally propose sentences that are shorter. And this is because media sensationalizing crime has primed voters to consider crime to be a very important political issue and having a harder stance on it. Now, this public fear has led voters to demand fiercer sentences from the politicians who are looking to get elected. The politicians then push for longer sentences to appear tough on crime. The following policies resulted from crime being an emotive issue in politics. Number 1 was the 3 strikes law. Now, politicians proposed the 3 strikes law to address the widespread fear among their constituents in the mid-1990s, and many politicians appeared to be the most punitive. And this policy mandates that state courts hand down mandatory and extended periods of incarceration to people who have been convicted of a criminal offense twice before reoffending. So their 3rd time, they would get a harder sentence. It significantly increases the prison sentences of people previously convicted, and it limits the ability of them to receive a punishment other than a life sentence. Supporters claim that this would keep repeat offenders incarcerated for lengthier periods of time and reduce crime rates by this. But in 1997, the Justice Policy Institute, Schiraldi, Colburn, and Lochte in 2004 compared the change in crime amongst states with and without the 3 strikes laws and found that the 3 strikes laws produced a disappointing crime control impact. Now, the second policy that came from this was the mandatory minimum sentencing, which limits judicial discretion and demand that people convicted of certain crimes be punished with a minimum number of years in prison, regardless of extenuating circumstances. The University of Minnesota law professor Michael Tonry concluded in his research that the enactment of mandatory penalties has either no demonstrable marginal deterrent effects or short-term effects that rapidly waste away. The third policy is the truth in sentencing. Many states developed this to curb parole so convicts serve the period they've been sentenced to. And many states adopted this, requiring certain criminals to serve 85% of their sentence before being considered for parole. Those serving such sentences account for now 42% of the state's total prison population, as reported by The Economist in 2010. So what's the solution? It's a three-part plan. The first part, maintain the current rate of current incarceration. In 2009, Clear and Austin reported in the Harvard Law and Policy Review that the iron law of prison population states that the size of the prison population has two determinant factors: how many people are incarcerated and how long they stay. Either one of these factors has to change for the prison population to change. But I argue that the current rate of incarceration does deter criminals. It's more effective to increase the likelihood you'll be convicted than to double the severity of the punishment. Professor Isaac Ehrlich found that if the number of convictions increases by 1%, the murder rate falls by about 1% too. If the number of executions increases by 1%, the murder rate only falls about 0.5%. And another reason is that the broken windows theory that we've heard about posits on the belief that cracking down on minor crimes will help prevent major ones and reduce opportunities for crime. A number of randomized experiments support this theory for policy. Thus, given that there is a lack of research supporting that the United States should increase the incarceration rate, maintenance of the current rate will suffice to deter criminals. But the second part of the plan is to lighten sentences for nonviolent crime offenders. In 1999, the Institute of Criminology at Cambridge University reviewed studies of deterrence and sentencing and found no basis for inferring that increasing the severity of sentences generally is capable of enhancing deterrent effects. And the third part of my plan is to increase the prison release rate. Recent studies show that the length of stay in prison is not associated with a change in the risk of recidivism. Longer stays offer diminishing returns for public safety. And as prisoners age, the likelihood that they will commit a crime drops, but the cost of their imprisonment rises, primarily because of increased medical care. This was reported by Maurer and Cole in Washington Post in 2011 on June 17th. And so now the money allocated for a prisoner to stay in prison can be redistributed for use in re-entry programs to help aid reintegration into the community and reduce recidivism rates. Will this solution work? Yes, because by reducing the lengths of sentences handed to nonviolent offenders, the United States could reduce its prison population in half, and prisons would not have to be so overcrowded. The United States could save up to $16.8 billion annually, as reported in the Center for Economic and Policy Research by Schmidt, Warner, and Gupta. Savings could go towards funding correctional programs aimed to rehabilitate inmates and society and reduce recidivism rates. And the advantages would be that the savings from reducing prison populations used to produce these correctional programs, which then lead to another reduction in crime and more savings, can then be used to free taxpayers' money to go towards other areas like education. Investment short-term can reap long-term benefits and save a lot of money down the line, used to provide education to people from low-income communities who are often the ones who are turned to crime because of their backgrounds. I believe that these advantages outweigh the disadvantages that would be increasing the number of people entering society from prison, which would be a risk factor for crime rates, and the fact that the prison industrial complex has become the primary source for funding for many towns. Because by reducing the length of sentences through increasing prison release rates and lightening the sentence handed to them, we can save billions of dollars a year that could be designated for correctional programs that help rehabilitate past criminals into society, reduce recidivism rates, and decrease crime. And while this may slow down the economies that revolve around the prison industrial complex, it can eventually lead to a redistribution of those taxpayers' money, of everybody's taxpayers' money, to be used on issues that more directly impact them, like education, which benefits both their children and the children of low-income families that would have otherwise turned to crime. I now stand open for cross-examination.
Okay, very quickly, a like. A like, yes.
I like the
Stand up for Buddha.
I like the flow of your presentation a lot, and I tried to put emphasis on certain words, which was important.
And it was a very nuanced approach, wasn't it? It wasn't meat cleaver. It was nuanced. Improvement.
Hi, my name is Hussein.
Hi, Hussein.
Overall, I thought it was really great. Maybe emphasize the narrative a little more so that there's, although you were fluid, maybe some connections.
Yeah, two quick questions.
Hi, my name is Lala.
Hi, Lala.
Do you think that we would need a bigger budget in order to keep funding prisons, or just to keep them running the same? Because you said you want to keep them the same.
Yeah, I want to maintain the current incarceration rate, which means to keep bringing them in, but lightening it so that we release prisoners and allow them to be considered for parole, so that prisons wouldn't have to be bigger. In fact, prisons would be able to get smaller, and we can control with overcrowding this way.
Yeah, she has it all worked out pretty nicely. Your question? Start with your name.
Hi, I'm Shireen.
Hi, Shireen.
In regards to your broken windows theory, why is it appropriate that we lock up small crimes that don't really have a direct impact unless we'd be paying for these people to remain in prison?
Yeah. Well, we wouldn't be paying for them to be staying in prison for very long. Their prison sentences would be very short. But it has been shown by Professor Isaac Ehrlich's research that it's more effective to increase the likelihood they get convicted than to increase their prison sentences. And right now, a lot of the problem is that we're putting these drug offenders for a really long time away, but it doesn't matter. If we only put them away for a shorter amount of time, it will still keep them and everyone else afraid of following the same offenses.
Okay, real briefly, you did a really good job. You had a nuanced approach. It wasn't, as I said, a meat cleaver, put them in there and throw away the key, build more prisons and forget about them. And so you really thought about this, and you thought about a way to finesse the whole system and keep some away, the dangerous ones, and put away and let out the non-violent offenders. So I thought that was good. It worked out pretty well. You went almost 10 minutes, so you need to work on your time and word economy, and your research was excellent. So you did a good job. Thank you. Okay, I'm giving out your midterm. This is to be done individually. I say here in the introduction that you're to provide for each question, even though I don't say it on each question, an example from the prison controversy debate that we're having. And if you don't provide an example, you won't receive full credit. And in order to really make that stand out, why don't you just put a big bold prison example after you answered the comprehension part of the question, so that you're showing me that you understand the material. Okay? Now, I also say here, be comprehensive to receive full credit for each answer. That means a longer answer than 1 or 2 sentences. I'll let you decide what comprehensive means, but try to make the answer be an adequate answer to cover the material, to adequately cover it. But I'm not looking for short 1 or 2 sentence answers on this exam. Any questions? Yes, please.
Did you say this should be like a good A paper is about 20 pages?
Yeah, a good A paper is about 20 pages. There you go. Thank you.
Is it double spaced?
Double spaced, and don't write on don't only print on one side, and put your name on every page. Thank you. Return with honor.
When you say prison examples, it doesn't have to be from criminal justice?
It can be from your brief. It can be from someone else's brief or controversy.
Different sources.
Yeah, different sources, yeah.
That's the question about how many calls we're doing.
Yeah.
You said you're supposed to email you sort of like like sort of like a narrative what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's all you're asking for.
I'm like a worded policy. What's your area?
It was banning religious education.
And this is doing 2 weeks, right?
The midterm?
Yeah, I said it was.
Oh yeah, the midterm is due in 2 weeks.
So basically, I'm just giving you sort of like an overview of what my take is. And how
So the U.S. federal government should ban all religion.
on the negative side, it should.
Man. Oh, I don't know about that one. Send it to me. I don't know about the negative. Shouldn't ban religious instruction.
That's the position I have.
Yeah.
I was given by default. I mean,
Yeah. What?
it was she was taking the other.
Send me the whole topic and we'll think about it. I really do it not here orally, but do it in writing.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Yeah, sure. So I just wanted to thank you're the person that works on the website, right?
Oh yeah.
Thank you for all your help. You do very good work. Very nice. Okay.
I need to write down the topic.
Where's the person that took my debate sign-ups? Did she return it?
Cool. I can do it.
Okay.
That's bad.
Professor, do you mind repeating the whole thing that you said we have to put after each one? It's like a bold.
In bold, put the word prison example.
For each question?
For each question.
So yeah, just roughly how someone was saying 20 pages. That was a joke, obviously,
Not
right?
kind of joke.
This is my other from his.
That's not a joke. That's about right. One girl did 64, some do 35, but 20 is about right.
For the 8 questions?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that based with backed up with a lot of quotes or like research, or is that all?
Just answering the question.
Really? Okay. And then, can you give an example of how you want, the prison debate, how you want this sort of weaved in? Can you?
Yeah, at the end of you answering the content of the content comprehension part of the answer, you say, so this concept appeared in the prison debate and happened this way.
Okay.
And you say, prison debate example, put it all in bold, and then elaborate on the prison debate example.
Okay.
Professor, I emailed you my midterm for your other class.
Yeah.
I have a hard copy.
Yeah, okay, good. It's not stable.
Because
anybody have a stapler?
It's like too many pages to staple.
Yeah, excellent. She's a Girl Scout.
Double space. I don't know if it's strong enough.
Yeah, we're. Thank you. Thank you. So we'll see you Saturday morning. Oh, Friday night.
Friday night.
Yeah. Okay.
Professor, what is the last question? What are we on for the debate this weekend? What's the schedule like? Like, do we debate till 5, or are we judging till 5, or what's the schedule?
I don't know. I'll send you the schedule tonight. I think it's it might be 5, it might be 7.
Okay.
It might go to 5 or 7 each day.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, you're here to talk to me about your paper. Yeah, okay, let's walk back to my office. Wait a minute, let me turn it. Is this still on? Yeah.